Today we're looking at Psalms 47. It begins, clap your hands, all you people. Shout unto God with the voice of triumph. Reminds me of a Keith Green song that I heard many years ago. It's just a triumphal psalm, 9 verses. It's all about the Lord reigning. It's just Lord reigning. It is just exaltation, which is a beautiful thing to do. Sometimes it's good to not just sit around in the dumps or sit around and think about your sin and sit around and think about things, but to realize how good God is and how mighty and powerful He is outside of your situation. You almost get that this is on a clear blue sky and He's just up, for the Lord is high is terrible. He shall subdue the people under us and the nation under our feet. He shall choose His inheritance for us. He will choose what we are to get. He will choose what we are to inherit. And He is in charge. And He's gone up with a shout, the Lord with the shout of a trumpet. So there should be some excitement here, and there's times of just sheer exuberance. So many of these psalms, although some of them are longer or shorter, again, there's some of them are small, but they're very powerful. And I really like Psalms 47 for that reason. Going back to Leviticus, again, we looked at the first 3 chapters where we're going over the different types of sacrifices. It's important that we see that it isn't just building a temple, worshiping God. The sin issue has to be taken care of. The sin issue that man has with God, because men are sinners. And He sets up, remember, we've talked about He set up the building, He set up the courtyard, He set up the priest, He set up the epoch, He set up the jewels in the epoch. He set all of this up. Now, how do you consecrate? How do you set apart? How do you take care of the sin offerings? And He begins, of course, like we said, with the burnt offering, which is holy to Him in worship. And then we have the meat offerings, which is a fellowship offering between Him and the priest. We have the peace offerings that keep Him at peace and to be at peace with the people that are around Him. And you'll use the different offerings for different things. Chapter 4 begins, we're talking about the sin offering. Now we're doing something for the fact that people have sinned. And so the first few instances we look at are people who have sinned in ignorance. You didn't know you were doing it, or you did it in the past and you didn't know it was against God's law. It's still a sin, but now it has to be taken care of. And he starts talking about like a sin, if a soul sins through ignorance, and you'll go through these. If the congregation sins through ignorance. Later we'll talk about if the ruler sins through ignorance. He even has one here where he says, if the common person should sin from ignorance. And you get the idea that someone who's even poor, who doesn't have a lot of resources. Well, there are ways of taking care of your sin. No one is without a way of taking care of sin. And he's very specific. They're very similar. There are some subtle differences when you're dealing with this. He talks about laying hands on. Remember, I've stated earlier, when I lay hands on something, I'm like saying, this is me. This is me before you dying. This is me before you shedding blood because of my sin. And since we can't do that, it's the idea of the vicarious sacrifice that we will see later with Christ. So the person comes, lays his hands on his bullocks, and kills the bullock. So you get the idea that maybe the priest helped him, but you were a part of the killing process. It was your sin that did it, and now you're going to have to take a part of it. In the New Testament, we see where Jesus says, he that was without sin cast the first stone. The idea in their law is if you saw somebody do something and was worthy of stoning, the person that saw it, the person that brought the charge would be the first one to throw the stone. So you would have to make sure that you were correct in your assessment. Here, there's a personableness. There's a personalness, I should say, to the justice going on. It's not just, someone, we told you to do it and then someone else puts the penalty. If you made the charge, you would be the first one to cast the stone. Here, this person is laying hands and then they are killing the bullock. Then the priest takes over and he takes his finger into the blood and just flips 7 times towards the sanctuary. And then they spill the blood outside of the camp on the altar, or outside of the camp at the bottom of the altar. And they'll take the fat away and the insides and the 2 kidneys, and it'll be taken up, and the skin of the bullock and the flesh and the head and the dung will be taken out and burned. Excuse me. Then the whole bullock shall be carried forth outside the camp where the ashes were poured. So you burn the whole thing, you take care of all of this, you take out the caul, you take out all of the toxins, so that that's not part of the toxic parts are not part of the sacrifice. The sacrifice is the meat, the sacrifice is not the head, the sacrifice is this core in a sweet smelling to God. All this extra stuff needs to be taken away. It's not part of the sacrifice. And so you burn that and you take it out. If a whole congregation sins, you do a similar thing where you take a young bullock and you do the same thing, and you dip your finger and you do 7 times towards the sanctuary. Then you make sure that you take out again the caul and the kidneys and the liver, take all of that out, and you burn it before God. If a ruler sins, he shall lay hands upon the head of a goat. So we've changed the animal up a bit, changed the procedure a little bit. If a common person sins, they can bring in a young kid of the goats, a female without blemish for his sin offering. He shall lay his hands upon the head of it. So you have a different allowance, if you will. If someone is more common, if they can't afford to get a lamb or can't afford to get a bullock, they still can take care of their sin issue through a shed blood. And same thing. We move quickly through 4 and 5 pretty quickly because it's meant to be a guidance for the priest, but we should read it. We shouldn't just skip over it or glaze over it. You should go through it. I'm not going point by point, but you really should, because there's a lot of good things to see here. This whole group of series of videos I'm doing are not meant to be all inclusive. I'm sitting to high points as I go across the grid from where I've been. I've read this book 7 times cover to cover. This is the 8th time through, and I wanted to do some videos about going over the grid. Did I cover everything that can be seen? No. Am I covering some of the important things that I see? And maybe hopefully in training that you will learn to use the grid for yourself. Don't just glean through it. I've been marking up my Bible still, learning things that I didn't know, learning things about the distinctives and the differences that are going on here. And I really didn't see this laying on of hands until I really saw it this time. I'm like, wow, we're always laying on of our hands, and the person that brings it is doing the killing. That's very important, that we're claiming this is us and then we're going to die, that death needs to happen for me because of my sin. But this is what Christ's vicarious sacrifice will be. And here we are, we're talking about the poor man, and they do the thing with the finger again towards the sanctuary, and they take the fat off and they burn it before the Lord as an atonement. And he can bring a lamb, a sin offering, and you can bring females. The poor people can bring females. The more affluent are most to stick with male. God is not trying to stick with, it seems like a strong pattern to where people can't participate in getting their sins forgiven. And they'll take away the fat of the lamb, and they burn it for atonement, and he shall be forgiven him. If a soul sin and hear a voice of swearing or a witness that has been known. So here we're going not just to actions, we're going to attitudes, we're going to statements. We never think about our statements as being sins also. The things that we say we will do. He wants his people to be a truthful people. If I say I'm going to do something, I'll do it. If I say I don't want to do it or I'm not going to do it, I keep my word and I don't. It's not about being a nice guy and doing something for people all the time, but it's about keeping your word. And if a soul touch an unclean thing, or if you touch the uncleanliness of a man, if you run across, excrement or something, you get something on your hands or something on your shoe or whatever, ways of being clean and not tracking in disease into the camp. If a soul swear, pronouncing with his lips to do evil or good, and he's to be guilty of things, it's because here we see the word trespass offering coming in. And it's very interesting to see the word trespass offering. Again, is that a sin, or is it a lower thing that is still a sin, but it's not a sin unto death? It is a sin that's going to cause problems. It's a sin that's going to create strife and struggle. It's going to be these components, these sociological components that create problems. And so if you do this, you bring a female from the flock or a kid of the goats, again, something that could be readily picked up. Or if necessary, bring 2 turtle doves for a sin offering and 1 for a burnt offering. So the trespass offering seems to have a sin offering and a burnt offering. So you're making an offering for the sin. So you're going back to one of those 4, but you're mixing 2 of them now. You're doing a trespass offering and a burnt offering. So you bring 2 simple animals you should be able to find. Again, we're mentioning turtle doves, pigeons. We've been male or female. It says a female from the flock, a kid of the goats, which maybe a lot of poor people had goats. The rich people had sheep and then cattle. You understand how that runs. And so to take care of this, you sprinkle the blood of the sin offering on the side of the altar, and the rest of the blood is rung down the altar, and it is a sin offering. And you offer the second offering as in the manner of the priest to make an atonement for him for his sins, and it'll be forgiven. If you're not able to bring 2 turtle doves, this even goes down to if you're so poor and you cannot even get turtle doves, you can bring an ephah of fine flour as a sin offering. So you can even go and take your food. You can take some of your food and use it for a sin offering. If you're that poor, you can take care of your sin debt. God is making sure that everyone knows sin is a big issue, but I'm willing to work with it. I'm willing to burn this down and take care of it so we can be at peace and we can have prosperity, we can have good economy, we can have good social structures, good family structures, safe and security, living in a land of milk and honey that God wants us to be in. But the sin issue is a big issue. Man thinks sin isn't a big deal. I'll tell him, I'm sorry, I'm moving on. When we see the fair amount of complexity that God has for dealing with sin, trespass, worship, he takes these things very important. It is not his fault that we don't sometimes, that we need to take it more important. I'm not saying do these sacrifices because they're all taken care of at the cross. But the cross wasn't just about getting us into heaven. The cross was about taking care of all of this issue. The blood of Christ takes care of all of these trespass issues, sin issues, burnt offerings. He is the burnt offering. He is the peace offering. He is the sin offering. He is even the trespass offerings for the things that I do that are, I'm not going to say little sins, but they're not sins unto death. So we see this that the priest shall take part of this as his meat. We're talking about the very poor man's sin offering. And if a soul will commit a trespass or a sin offering through ignorance in the holy things of the Lord, then he shall bring his trespass unto the Lord, a ram without blemish. But once again, a trespass against the holy things of the Lord. You've handled something you shouldn't. You bumped into something you shouldn't. You brushed. I mean, you're getting the idea that trespass is just that. It's like getting into someone's personal space. That's considered a sociological trespass even today. Getting too close to somebody, handling somebody else's stuff, moving somebody else's stuff. These different things are considered as a trespass. And, you get the idea there. And so if you trespass against the holy things, you need to make amends for the harm that you did to the holy things. The holy thing is not holy anymore because you touched it. The spoon was out or something or whatever, So he has them take care of that. And if a soul sin and commit any of these things that are forbidden by the commandments of the Lord, though he wist not, yet he is guilty. Remember, even if you wist not, using some nice King James wording here, even though you didn't know it, that's when someone comes to you and say, hey, you shouldn't have picked that up. Or, hey, you shouldn't have moved that. Hey, you shouldn't be here. Hey, you shouldn't have touched that. Hey, you shouldn't have, if somebody comes up and touches the garment of a priest, you don't think about it. They're walking by and you reach over and go, wow, that's nice material. You've polluted him. And now you've created a trespass. Maybe you didn't know I didn't know I wasn't supposed to touch that. And yet here they are doing this. But even though you've done this in ignorance, this shall be done and it'll be forgiven him. God goes back in chapter 6 to again identify the 3 offerings. He says that if a soul sin and commit a trespass against the Lord and lie unto his neighbor, again we're dealing with a sociological thing, lying. That you're lying unto your neighbor, that you're going to keep something for him or be in fellowship, or you're lying about, something was given to you as a pledge to watch for, and you're telling them that it was stolen from me. Sorry, man, it's gone. But you're lying. You're lying so you can keep it. And if it is found that he has sworn falsely, that is the key words there. when you swear falsely about something, and it's almost like a court of law, or courts of law we're used to be bound on, I will tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. And here we are, if you're swearing falsely, we can't have justice and we can't have good economy. You almost see like the governmental structure, the economy, the nation he's trying to build is a fine tapestry. But it has to be done a certain way or else it starts to unravel. And if we cannot trust one another's words, if we cannot trust the statements that are made, that the truthfulness of statements, then we cannot have adequate justice. We see that even today. And if you've sinned against that and it's found out that he was guilty, you'll add a fifth part. So whatever the value of it that you were holding, like it was a cow or a sheep, and you wanted to keep it, now you owe a fifth value. So it's 20%. That's 20% penalty made because of this. And you shall bring the trespass offers to the Lord, a ram without blemish. So now you're going to be out of ram. So you're going to lose by not keeping your word. He goes over the burnt offering again, 6 is going back and telling the priest a little fine-tuning of how to handle the burnt offerings, the meat offerings, and the sin offerings. The burnt offerings would be done at night, and it's burned all night long, so you're always cooking. And this is going up to God as a sweet savor. And imagine 8 hours of a sweet savor that will waft over the area. You're laying in bed and you smell this, and you just smell the provisions that are going up for God. And the priest will do this. They'll burn the offerings, then they'll change their clothing and carry these ashes out and dump them outside the camp. So there's a change of clothing here. You're not going out, wearing the same ash covered, or, it's hard to carry ashes and not get them all over yourself. So you're burning the offering. You're standing afar from it, of course. It's a fire. And then when you go to get the ashes, you change clothes first. Then you go get the ashes and take them out. It's like putting on your work clothes. And you go, and this fire shall be burning upon the altar, and it will never go out. Always doing a burnt offering. Always doing an offering to God. He talks about the meat offering, going through that again. The reminder of which the Aaron and his sons shall eat. With unleavened bread they shall eat. So they're not eating leavened bread here. And the males of Aaron shall eat of it. So again, this participatory relationship between the priest and God. This is a very beautiful thing. And he goes on and finishes off the chapter talking about reminding them of the sin offering. And this is the law of the sin offering. And it is most holy. This is a holy offering. Now the others are holy offerings, but this is the most holy offering. The most holy offering is used as the sin offering. And Jesus was our sin offering. And he is the most holy offering. It is important to take care of the sin issue here, not just to have fellowship. There are a lot of Christians who want to have fellowship, or non-Christians who want to have fellowship with God, but I don't want to take care of my sin problem. Or I'm willing to worship God and send up a burnt offering of something, some free worship of God, but I don't want to take care of my sin issue. And again, we see that he has said that this is most holy. Holy. The priest shall offer it for sin offering, shall eat it in the holy place. So there is a small participation with the priest here, again, of the sin offering. Whatever touches the flesh shall be holy. So only the priest could participate in the sin offering. And who participates in the sin offering? Jesus, our high priest. And there is the sprinkling of the blood on any garment, thou shalt wash it thereof. And if you sprinkled in the holy place, so if you've sprinkled the blood, and then you need to wash up what's touched the blood. The blood is holy. You don't just leave it there. You've got to clean up after yourself. If there's an earthen vessel used, it shall be broken. And if it can be scoured and rinsed with water, if not, it's broken. You don't reuse the pot. If you've made the pot and you can clean it. If you can, you break it. You don't use it for common things. Well, we're done with this pot. We'll give it to somebody to go make, dinner with or something. No, the pot has been made holy. All males among the priests shall eat of it. It is holy. Okay, so all the priests will participate in the sin offering when they do the sin offering, and it'll be holy. And no sin offering whereof any of the blood that is brought into the tabernacle of the congregation to reconcile wherein in the holy place shall be eaten, it is burnt with fire. There is no blood to be eaten or drank. It is burned with fire. It's important that you see these offerings are consuming. You will consume the entire thing. The burnt offering is consumed and sent to God. The meat offering is consumed by God and by fire and by the priest. None of it's left over. It doesn't go outside the camp. And the sin offering is completely burnt, or of course made ashes and dumped out, and only participated with the priest and of course the sons of the priest. We need to realize that, and we're going to go into we're talking about later on the trespass offering, the peace offerings. Many of these are, but again, this is very important when we stop and spend some time thinking about the intricacies that God has done here. There's a lot of detail oriented to sacrifice. When you're dealing with holiness and dealing with sin, sometimes it is not just a simple blanketing, okay, I'm sorry. We don't realize how, not complex, but how intricate this was, that Christ simply just washed the whole thing over and said, I'll make this even easier. I will come and be the burnt offering, be the fellowship offering, the meat offering. I will be the sin offering. I will be the trespass offering, even for the little things you do. Come to me. But when we look at this, that's what's been covered. Can you imagine if we had to do these things today, if they had instituted a form of neo-Judaism for us to get to Christ, and we would have to go through these things. Christ could have done that. He could have tweaked the law a little bit and said, now do these things and you'll have forgiveness. But he took it up a notch. Look, I'm going to fulfill. He didn't take it away. We tend to look at this as God took it away, it's not important. No, he's fulfilled it. We need to stop and look sometimes at what he has fulfilled to see the power of what he has done. So when we go to Leviticus, let's see the beauty that's there. Let's look at it at the grid and see it for what it is, how wonderful it is. Everything that comes from God is wonderful. And it's participatory, it's strong, it's holy, and with the sin offering, it's vital. Thank you.